Finally showing. Hello, Don. Welcome to Mind Shifters Radio, everybody. Delighted, honored that you're here, and we get to move forward in this conversation once again about first century Aramaic forgiveness. And we're still dealing with challenges with the app. We've been talking with Allende this morning, and we're going to keep working on getting this whole system restructured. And Allende is working on the app and working on getting it, whatever's going on with our studio app. The listening app appears to be doing all right. Yesterday, since my voice was so low on the iPhone, I decided to just go back to my Android, which now I am on and cannot see the listeners list, nor can I see the comments. But hey, at least we can talk, hopefully. And we've got a bit of a hesitation here. Gene, maybe you could let me know if you can hear me. The app shut down and does not appear to be opening up properly. Oh, okay, good, awesome. Well, I can see the list. Welcome, Sally and Jeannie and Dawn and Susan. Welcome back. Hope everything is doing well. Melanie, and we're just rocking along. We're still working through some issues with the app. Apparently, they've done a new version of the studio, and they're having some challenges with that. And let's see if I can see comments at the moment. It appears that I cannot see comments again, or still. So, Jeannie, maybe when you leave here, if there are any important comments that come up, if you'd let me know, and maybe when you leave here, if you'd leave me your second phone, apparently on the listening app, Jeannie can see the comments. So we'll just rock forward. And yesterday we were talking about tapping into the energies moving within your structure and being initiated into a place where, you know, and you've heard me say it 1,000 times, but being initiated into a place where you're out of your mind. Where literally you are not living in a carbon basement, where you're not living in its fraud, you're not living in its replicating the past over and over and over again, playing out those power person dynamics. But you know, when they said the mind of man is not yet conceived of what lies in store, what they're saying is that this 9-bit multi-generational database called a body mind unit has nothing in it but the past. And it's only when we can still that voice, when we can quiet that part of the mind, which, you know, meditation is a way of doing it. There is nothing on the planet that I know of that compares with the act of forgiveness in getting the mind to shut down. And when the mind shuts down, you start to feel and experience on a subtler level. Yesterday, I talked about pulses moving in your body. I'm realizing, for me at least, that these pulses are an indicator that there's another level of energy available to me. And my take is that it is literally Rukha, as spoken of in the Aramaic, that feminine elemental force that is ready to teach if we're ready to listen, ready to speak directly to you. And that's where you get direct, specific instructions for your process. This is where, as I said yesterday, the real teacher is. And to let go of the busyness, the drug state, and give yourself the space to acquaint yourself with the literal. I mean, it has never left. That's why my take, you've heard me say it, it's always shiny and new when I can collapse carbon-based memory. That still small voice, that presence of love, literally the creator's energy moving within you, is always there. And that instruction said, go into the closet and close the door. You can't keep the door of all the senses open because energetically the senses are such loud ruckus frequencies. It's like, imagine that you're in an arcade and you're trying to listen to a quiet conversation on your phone, and the arcade games are screaming and raging and going off here and there and everywhere. Well, that's what the senses are. And that's why most of the ancient teachings said things like go into the closet and close the door. Many of them use the word meditation for it. But if you're stuck in the raucous world, this state cannot be achieved. And so there is an initiation to go through, a period of shifting your attuning mechanism. And in fact, the word soul, the word that's been translated as soul in the Aramaic language, can be properly translated as a tuning mechanism. What are you attuned to? If you're attuned to the senses in the world, if that's what comes first, then sensation displaces your true life and true fulfillment. So, this state we're talking about is not available from what was called in the ancient scriptures the mind of man. You remember they said that the mind of man is not yet conceived of what lies in store. So, all of humanity living out of carbon-based memory. And if you go back to that story about John the Baptist, you remember that Yeshua spoke of him as he's the highest in the world of those who have come from woman. He's talking about the body-mind unit. And if you're living in the body-mind unit and carbon-based memory, you may have a brilliant one. It may be genius. And isn't that great? But you remember what Yeshua said about John the Baptist, one who is locked into carbon-based memory or the mind of man, as brilliant, as intelligent, as accomplished as it is, the very highest level of accomplishment there, what he said is, in the true kingdom, in the community of love, he's the lowest. So many people, look at the functioning of carbon-based memory and say, "Oh, I want that. I want the best one of those I can get." And and to the world, that's awesome, but it's trash compared to living in the truth. So this state is only available when you're initiated into and begin to listen to that still small voice. And if you're still listening to a screaming, raging ego, if you still got people in the world, you've got blame, you've got stories about them and what's wrong with them and how to, and this world I'm talking about is not available. If you're unwilling to do the work to silence that voice with all its criticisms and all its upsets and all its disturbances and it's all its rationalizations for living in the one world universal religion of blame. Well, I'm only upset because if you're not willing to do the work to silence that voice, if you still hold on to one grievance about one person, then that noisemaker is going to interfere with your ability to live in the world of truth. So there are two options. There's the one of blame, where you walk away from that upset state, and maybe you did some work around that upset state. That person did something and it brought something up for you, and you did some work around that. You go, well, I got some good insight, but you're still carrying the load of the blame game of why you were justified in the judgment you made and the things that you said about them, and you're still locked into the noisemaker. And that, I call it the one world universal religion of blame. You need and the what's the word I'm looking for? The lockdown into that world is the noise of the voice of blame. That is going to have to be given up. And the most profound and powerful way I know to give that one up is through forgiveness. It's the only way I know to consistently, persistently weaken that voice. Yes, John the Baptist and his crew, those who are the very highest in the those born of women, have 1,000 distractions, but not one of those distractions will take you into the initiation that's needed. So, to begin to do the work of consciously entering into your own temple and doing the work required to still that voice and start to listen. Now, there's a misunderstanding of how the world can be a distraction from the real work. The religions condemn the world, and there's a whole story about stay away from the world. No, 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 it doesn't mean stay away from the world. It means you enter into the world as conscious active present love, not out of a state of non-being. And once you do that, then the world is literally the Garden of Eden, where conscious creation occurs. So busyness is the number one drug, the number one prison that prevents entering into this state. Hostility is number two. And then the world has its whole series of drugs: blame, guilt, fear, rage, hatred, vengeance, alcohol, drugs, sugar, caffeine, nicotine. Now, ultimately, taking on and doing your work doesn't mean you don't work in the world, you don't play in the world, you don't enjoy the world. The difference is whether being is present and is the experiencer of the work or the play that you do in the world, or whether it's the non-being mind. Back in the latter part of the Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote a really profoundly powerful phrase that fits right in with what we're talking about here. And what he said is, we need to get our bloated nothingness out of the way of the divine circuits. No matter what's going on in your world, the divine circuits open. There is a full flush physiologically where your physiology and your mind are fueled by the active presence of love. Blame is not possible in that state. Having a conversation about how somebody else has a problem in your life isn't possible in that state. Now, you listen to that, and it's I mean, he says it so beautifully. Clearly this guy was really doing his work. Get your bloated nothingness out of the way of the divine circuits. If the pulses of love, if you are physiologically aligned, and this is where the quantum still point, my take is, it's becoming so important, at least in my understanding, because it breaks the addiction to carbon-based memory. And if you don't break your addiction to carbon-based memory, then when the stress is up and the chips are down, your power person dynamic is going to take over. You're going to pretend you don't have a power person dynamic. Oh, I've already taken care of all of that. But you'll notice the disturbance and upset that you have and how it's pointed at somebody else. Now, you look at that statement from Emerson, and of course, Miracles has almost the identical idea, worded slightly differently. And this particular piece of information from the course is at the core of forgiveness. Two places on planet Earth where you will find how to collapse carbon-based memory so that you can enter into the initiation of and the subtle state of being able to hear directly from the creator. Physiologically, it happens. how do you do that? You recognize that the thing that keeps carbon-based memory on go with all of its blame and all of its unresolved power person dynamics and generational pain and trauma is there something you want. Yeshua said forgive. And the word forgive in Aramaic is shabag or shabak, and it literally translates to cancel. Everything that comes from the mind of man is driven by a goal. When you cancel the goal, what the mind of man is presenting to you collapses. So that comes out of the first century Aramaic. It's right there in the course. I did not see it until I understood it, until I had the eyes to see and the ears to hear, until I had the brain cells. I did not understand this when I read it in the course. But here's what it says. Parallel this with get your bloating nothingness out of the way of the divine circuits. Let go all the things you think you want. Your trifling treasure put away. What is a trifling treasure? Your bloated nothingness. So the course calls a goal your trifling treasure. What does it say? Let go of it. Cancel the goal. That thing that you think, oh, I want to be able to deliver to somebody in the world what my power person delivered to me, that ultimate blow, because that blow that devastated me, if I can just deliver it to somebody else, then I will have the power of God, my power person. So there's always that unresolved. I have to get that power person's power and express it. That's why when until this the energetic pattern of the power person dynamic is forgiven, that is removed from the structure, when the stress is up and the chips are down, everyone, and this runs the world, everyone defaults. Everyone defaults. And the automatic decision system with its multi-generational database kicks in, and against one's own will and choice, this happens oftentimes. What they do is they default to what the power person did to them that they hated the most. That's the behavior. Oh, if I can deliver this blow, then I have the power of God, my power person. Your bloated nothingness, got to put it away because it interrupts the ability to be in the flow of conscious, active, present love. The divine circuits, as Emerson put it. And yet, most everybody clings to their goals like it's life itself. And when the stress is up and the chips are down, nobody wants to look at that power person dynamic. But cancel the goal. Your trifling treasure put away and leave a clean and open space within your mind. And the way the Course says it is for Christ to come. But basically, what it's saying is for that still small voice, for the active presence of love to become that which is most precious, the moments where you have that. And, if you've been addicted to carbon based memory, those moments at first are going to be few and far between. But as you cultivate that, as you spend time with that, it just becomes so precious. And it's where your true instruction comes from for what you have to do in your life to achieve living a true human life. And that's what the Course describes as Christ coming to your mind. So what is the experiencer in you? Is the experiencer in you the self based in the power person, the bloated nothingness, the trifling treasure? Is that your experiencer in the world? Got to give it up. If you have one hostility or fear based judgment against one person, you haven't given it up yet. And the purpose of the world is to kick us right square in the limitation, to show us exactly what it is that we're holding on to. But that's the very but oh no, this treasure, I don't want to get rid of this treasure. This is so precious. Why? Because the power person dynamic is still operative. To the ultimately, there's a shift that takes place. There's a transition where we experience our lives out of, and all of life is interpreted by that power person, through that power person dynamic, by the non-being self, the part of the mind that Yeshua said, in order for you to live, you've got to die. There's a self in you that is not true. When I was a kid, there was a record, 33 RPM. Remember the big old 33 RPM records that I had, and I listened to this thing over and over and over. I mean, I don't know. I probably listened to this thing 1,000 times. I mean, literally as a kid. And it was a story about the bear that wasn't. I don't know. Maybe that's one of the things that taught me about the non-being self, the self that isn't, and that non-being self is fabricated and has all the needs of adapting to the power person dynamic, all the goals, all the unconscious dynamics. That's the bloated nothingness. That's the trifling treasure, the self based in the trifling treasure. If that's the interpreter of your life, then you still got somebody that you're going, yep, them. Now, living out of the being self doesn't mean you can't look at somebody who's done something outrageously, insane, and say that's outrageously insane. But it isn't nah, 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 pointing a finger at somebody out of hostility or fear. It's being the space of active love that can hold that in love. What's the well, Michael? How do you do that? Well, what makes that happen? Well, let's go back 2,000 years ago. There was this amazing man, and they asked him that question: "What do you do? What's first? What's most important?" And he used a word for which there is no equivalent in the English language. There is no equivalent in the derivative languages, the language between the Aramaic and us, and as English speaking peoples. There is no word in either of the derivative languages, Greek or Latin, that brings anything that resembles this word into English. And what is that word? What does it mean in this context? He said, when they asked him what's most important, in essence, their question was, if I want this initiation, if I want to live this, what's most important? He says, first law. Whenever you think of the creator or a neighbor, you have to be seeing through a filter in your mind, and you have to have this dual purpose filter gateway open in you. God, how are we going to do that if there isn't even a word for it? What was the word in Aramaic? It's Rakhma. What does it mean in this context? If that gateway is shut, and it is shut by blame, it is shut by hostility, it is shut by fear. If you got a big story about somebody in your life that, boy, if they're then hostility and fear are the active filters, and only one filter can be active at a time over the frontal lobes of the brain where intentions are stored, and over the back of the brain where perception is stored. Now, if you got a really good carbon-based memory and you're right up there with John the Baptist, boy, you got an airtight story. And if somebody asks you to look at something other than your airtight story, you're going to laugh at them. Hey, I know better than that. No, no, no. Only one filter. It's either hostility with its destructive intentions, it's fear with its negative intentions, or it's Rakhma with its loving intentions. That's first and foremost because intention is a raw material of goals, and it is goals, once activated, that drive the perceptual mind. All that intentions are raw material. Dan McDougall, bless his heart, you've probably heard me talk to him if you've been with the show for a while. He was my partner in the Kavor's Manuscript Project in writing Laws of Living. Amazing mind, amazing man. World War II, he was in the Navy. When they did IQ tests, he was number 3 in the whole Navy with IQ. Amazing, amazing man. And what he used to say about intentions was, it was like one of his favorite. I can hear his voice still today. Intentions can no more move a muscle. And remember, the main muscle that moves in the creative process is your tongue. He said, no more move a muscle than a shadow can carry a stone. So what Yeshua was saying 2,000 years ago is first and foremost, if you're going to operate carbon-based memory, if you're going to get this body mind unit operating, the first order of business is you've got to have the gateway open so that your own physiology and your own mind is in this initiated state, is fueled by conscious, active, present love at every instant. And at the instance that it's not, that's the time to look at the goal that's driving the system, cancel the goal, collapse the perceptual construct, return to the active presence of love. It's key. And basically shifting out of the hostility and fear-based mind, weakening, and to do that, you can say you want out of it, but if you're not willing to go into carbon-based memory, find the energetic patterns that lock you in there and forgive them, weaken them through forgiveness. And it might take 77 times, 70 times to clean up any given issue, especially if it's a power. That's why that power person worksheet is so important that we did last week. If you haven't been with us, go back and G's got a section in our YouTube channel with the shows we did on the power person worksheet. And I apologize. I'm still refining it. I'm still adjusting it. I had hoped I would have it done before the show today, but I did not. But hopefully I'll get it done and within the next day or so, and that will put it on the website. And the people who I've talked to, I said I'd be sending it to you. I will send it to you. But making this change is what the work is about. That's what every tool we've got is about. That's what our intents of coming up. If you're having trouble getting into the energetic experience of it, come be in the presence of the energetic experience of it and do the work. That's what the intents we'll be doing at the end of May is about, is getting into an experiential state where you don't have to initiate this whole thing by yourself. It's already present and the support is there for the tools. Many people who, when they're introduced, if you've gone through in the past the still point breathing process, many get introduced to it, and then and we inform people this is meant to be used for yourself by yourself. But then I hear back from them, it's like, Well, when I did that with you, man, stuff open. It was awesome. But I just can't get anything to happen. Nothing changes when I do it in myself. And so that's the whole purpose of that process. And of course, then doing the one-on-one quantum still point is personal intensive is the next level of that. But each intensive, each tool is designed to take one into a deeper experience of being with the objective of developing the understanding of what it is to live from this state of being, to be attuned to and sensitive to the energetic, literally, if you let's use a metaphor. I have an antenna on the roof. There's a signal flowing through the air for channel 4. If I'm inside the antenna and the antenna is out of alignment, I get no taste of the signal coming from channel 4. Okay. If the arms are all bent, the antenna is backward, there's no resonance, no energy from that signal floating through the air gets into the antenna. Therefore, I can't see channel 4 on the TV. If I start bringing the arms into alignment, this is kind of like starting to do your work. I bring this arm that's bent. I bend that arm. I adjust that arm. Oh, I tweak this one a little more. Gee, there are 17 different arms on this antenna that looks like some kind of a tower. Sits up there on top of the, and I bend it and I align it, and all of a sudden the alignment comes close enough that I got 10% signal strength coming in. Gee, I look at the TV and all of a sudden, well, it's kind of shadowy and it floats in and out and it fades and it's there and it's back and it's there and it's snowy and the sound is noisy, but I can tell there's something there. And I adjust another, I do another worksheet, I do another piece of work, I do another piece of work. Oh, I discovered the antenna was turned backward. I turned the antenna around. Gee, when I was 3, I was dropped on my head and my antenna was totally and completely racked up. So I turned the antenna the other way. Oh, geez, I've got 50% signal strength. Wow, this is so cool. I've got access to not only carbon-based memory now, but I've got access to this other mind that was called the mind of Christ. And I can receive information. And this is all an energetic dynamic. And every tightening of the jaw, every holding of the breath, every locking down of the tissue structure is how this antenna gets locked up. And when it's locked up, there's an addiction to that power person dynamic. So to develop the understanding of what it is to live from that other state and do the work to literally, we were all given an instrument, and it's about bringing the instrument into alignment and removing the energetic patterns resident there that have maybe gone on for 1,000 generations. If you look back and you can remember a supremely powerful and painful interaction with your power person, and you haven't fully entered that and processed through it, when the stress is up and the chips are down, it's going to take over your life again. What is the experiencer? Is the experiencer a false structure in your mind that you call self or ego? Good set of initials. Edging God out, edging love out of perception is what the ego does. Who was it that talked about this loveless toil that people fill their lives with? And they think that's accomplishment. Look, I made $1 billion. Well, yeah, my kid committed suicide, and yeah, well, alcohol, drugs, yeah, well, yeah, I'm separated from the people I care about. But hey, look at all this money I've accomplished. Well, John the Baptist, remember, was called the raving maniac in the desert. What is that symbolic of? That's one who's living out of the unconscious mind. And replicating. Remember, Carl Jung said, what do you have to do? You have to make the unconscious conscious. He says, if until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will run your life and you will call it fate. You're bloated nothingness. Your strife and treasure will run your life. All that has to happen is if you resonate it into activity. And if there's not enough alignment that allows the energetic impulse to be received. Literally, there's resonance. So that TV antenna is up there. There's 100% signal strength, but so far out of alignment, there's only 2% that's received in the antenna, and only that much available to the TV set. I start doing the work. I clean up this one, I clean up, and all of a sudden I get to 50%, but it's still unreliable. It's a process. You don't undo 1,000 generations. And if you think about it, most people that I talk to, and of course this is projection too, because I'm talking to myself, there's nobody that I can think of. If I go back to my generations, aunts, uncles, cousins, siblings, parents, grandparents, there's nobody that could have thought of this, had this conversation. So you too are probably an early adopter. It's going to take a lot of willingness and a lot of patience to make the transition, to move forward from that misaligned state where locked in bone. Remember a while back I talked about a still point session I'd done where I was told that I had to start to face in my own tissue structure that which had been locked in bone. That's part of what the quantum still point is about, is opening that gate. It's interesting. I did a mini. I was in Florida back several months ago, and there was a friend who I've worked with for years, who's been doing this work for many years, for decades actually, but doing it only kind of on the periphery. When the stress was up and the chips are down, I'd hear from him. He'd call into the show. We'd do some processing. He'd do a worksheet, and then months would go by, and I'd talk to him. Oh yeah, well, I don't really need that. I'm fine. Everything's cool. And he'd asked if I had time to do a still point session, which I did. And the quantum still point's a 3-day process, so obviously I didn't have time to do that with him. And we just in a period of about a 3-hour session, did kind of a mini quantum session with him. So he'd been doing the work literally for decades, had actually been there, watched me develop a lot of it. And from time to time, when there was a crisis, he'd delve into it. But then he'd go back to the world of sensation. At least that would be my interpretation. And when we did that, it was a very intense session. And for months, he's talked to me about how, wow, so many things I was working on. He's a body worker. I had misalignment in my spine and my back, and I've been able to work through that. I like several really powerfully, on the edge of miraculous type results that he was able to produce. And, it was just a mini. We didn't have the space to do a full one. So we set up to do a full blown session. And we set up an appointment. He traveled here, and we stepped into doing the process. And then he pulled another powerful piece of the puzzle that Carl Jung offers. And he says this: people will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own souls. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Carl Jung. People will do anything. Look at the absurd things you've done to justify doing hostility or fear. And I'm putting my name in there too. The absurd things that I've done to justify hostility and fear. Anything in order not to face this presence that has every gift you've ever wanted and will give it to your physiology if you'll get your bloated nothingness out of the way. So we did the initial phases of the quantum still point, and we were ready to do the last piece of it, which is like the core intense piece. It's physiologically intense. And he spoke about and had the recall of the first mini session that we did. And it's like, I don't want to do that. And so, okay. Well, let's go for it. He went into, and this is a guy who's in his 70s. I mean, he's a doctor, He's like, and literally what he did was he started to physically run around the room, plugging his ears and making as much verbal noise as he could in order to drown out my voice, inviting him to step into the process. I'm literally like a little kid. Just yabbering away just in order. And no, I'm not going to do it. He'd gotten such major shifts out of it the first time. Like, I'm here to do it. And he invested a lot to get set up to do it. He would not do it. That's what I mean. I really understood what Carl Jung was saying when he said people will do anything, no matter how absurd. So the next time your mind wants to get absurd and wants to avoid, take a breath, soften, use the tools, get your bloating and nothingness out of the way. The name of this absurdity in Aramaic, the source of this absurdity is Satan. Now, remember, those who are members of the one world universal religion of blame will go, oh, yeah, Satan, that guy out there, the dude with the red suit, the tail, and the pitchfork, Satan made me do it. No, that's in the religion. If you're a part of the religion of blame, you believe in that Satan. The real Satan that Yeshua was talking about in Aramaic, it's an internal process. The resistor, one who misleads. Notice, and you take that, it's a dual process, resistance. You ask somebody who does something absurd, has judgments about another person that are outrageous and dishonest, and you invite them into truth. And what do? Disconnect. I'm out of here. No, I'm not going there. That's the resistor. And then you'll notice if you've ever been trapped in Satan and you go into resistance, no, I don't want to deal with that. Then the second half of the definition of Satan is one who misleads, an internal process of resistance. You look at the average person, you ask them to be responsible for something that's obviously physiologically, mentally, and emotionally disturbing in them. What do? No, I don't want to look at that. I don't want to deal with that. And then they've got a whole story about how it's all somebody else's fault. And then when they disconnect, they still continue to tell the story about how it was them who were the problem. I mean, just so classic of that one world universal religion of blame. Just be aware that that's a trap. And when it's time, when Yeshua talked about moving mountains, the mountains that need to be moved are the mountains of resistance that come from within, that need to be forgiven. Tim Hayes is in queue. I can see you. Let's see if I can put you into the call, Tim. I was instructed this morning by the owner of the app to shut down and reopen, and that he was able to see callers. And I can see, Tim, that you're there with your hand up, but unfortunately, I can't let you in. I'm hitting the button over and over and over again.
Are you
Oh,
there?
you're there. Hey, we got you. Hey there,
I,
good sir.
I finished my meeting early and was seeing some comments about you couldn't take callers, and so I thought I would open up the listening app and see if we could connect.
Well, we're connected. Welcome. Good to hear your voice.
Thanks.
How do you be?
I'm well. I'm baffled about how you are not able to take callers, except me. Of course, we know I have the magic touch, but
Well, Allende gave me the key today. He said yesterday he tested it because we hadn't been able to take callers for several days, and he said he closed the app down and reopened it. So that's what I just did. That allowed me to even see that you were there, and so welcome.
all right. Well, I can't really comment too much because I haven't been listening to the show. I just finished a meeting, as I said, and then saw this note that you were still struggling and thought I would. But I had another person who normally attends the support group who said she couldn't open the app yesterday, and I was wondering if I would have the same difficulty, but I don't. So here we
Oh,
are.
good, awesome, awesome. Well, delight to hear your voice, holding you in a blessing. And thanks for getting in. And let's see if I can see. I still see there's one hand up. Let me see if I can. I can't get into it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull Andy's trick again. I'm going to shut the app down for a second and reopen it. It keeps everything active. Listeners, please stay with me. We're still experimenting with it. And so we actually lost a couple of listeners, but and I've lost you, Dr. Tim, I think.
Well, it says I'm
Are
still
you? Oh,
connected.
no, you're still there. Okay. I don't see you, but you're still connected. So there's
Yeah, that
obviously some
is.
funny stuff going on with the app.
Yeah, that is a thing that has happened to me in the past. That when someone's had a bad connection and I've tried to disconnect them, they're still there.
Right. Yeah. Well, I found in the app that I have to go back in where I connected them and disconnect them there in order to disconnect somebody. But anyway, well, glad you're here. Any great input? Anything exciting happened in your show today that you'd like to share with us? We got 9 minutes.
Well, I think Susan was quite useful, and anybody that wants to review that would have great benefit because she was talking about being really stuck and what it takes to get unstuck. And instead of doing another worksheet, um, we we stumbled onto a sentence completion that she could use the same way she would use a mind shifter, and
Right.
to be willing to keep banging the gong, as it were, for a thought pattern that might be negative, that might come to the surface, if she's willing to keep answering the mind shifter, carving out some
Right.
time to work with it, or to work with the sentence completion the way she would work with a mind shifter. And it's she's one of those brave souls who keeps calling and sharing and asking for assistance, and it's for anybody who's willing to look at it, it's highly useful. It's a very good example of the process and the tools working.
Awesome. Well, definitely high on my appreciation list is Miss Susan, who has, I mean, she's really been a powerful lifeblood for this show for several years now. She's so willing and steps up and,
Yeah,
just
several, like
keeps.
8.
Yeah. Is it 8 now? Really? You've
Oh
looked into
yeah,
that? Oh
yeah,
my
at
goodness. I was
least.
thinking
Yeah.
more like 5. Wow.
No, no, we have completed 14 years, and she was probably in our 5th or 6th year. So it's been probably at least 8.
Well, if you're, I can't see the list of who's on, but Miss Susan, if you're still with us, know you are appreciated.
Yeah, it's interesting to be on the listener app. It says you have 13 listeners currently,
Yes,
but
yes, that's what
but
I'm showing.
it doesn't show me a list of who they are.
Yeah,
But when I have
normally
the
I can
studio,
hit
yeah, when I have the studio app open, I can switch a page to find out at least the thumbnails or
who's there,
the
right?
nicknames for who's there.
Yeah, and I can't open that on the app. Um, doesn't matter how often I hit it. So on the studio app. But anyway, all right. Well, mucho gusto. Thank you. Anything else
Are
to
you still
share?
there? Nope. I'm
I'm still here.
complete and looking forward to getting some resolution to the technology so it's a smoother functioning process for you and for the first hour.
Yes, yes, and I know Andy is working diligently, and when I talk to him, he sounds a little on the stress side. I'm very concerned about getting it working. So, and I'm sure that's going to work its way through before too long.
From your mouth to God's ears, as my grandmother would
Ah,
say.
thank you, Granny. All right, you have a blessed one, Tim.
All right.
All right, bye bye. So we're talking about this idea of the resistor, Satan, being an internal process. The resistor, one who misleads. That everybody's got a story about somebody that, that's why they're in their judgment or they're upset or whatever it is. And when one is ready, when one steps up to the plate and says, I'm ready to do my work, then as Yeshua said, it doesn't matter what the mountain is. I can remember actually the first time I was engaged in doing any work along these lines, this goes back, I don't know, 52, 53 years ago, maybe a little bit more than that, as I think about it. It was a gentleman that I knew, a friend, and he was in the real estate business. And he had he worked for a company, and the company required him to do this workshop. And he came back, it was a weekend workshop, and he came back from the weekend workshop and he hated it. He hated it. He did not like it at all. But he was telling me about it, and what he told me about it, I knew from what he said, even though it did nothing for him, and he hated it, that I had to be there. And at that time, I was in the business world. That was when I was in the restaurant business, and I had my busiest time in my main restaurant of 3 locations was weekends, and this workshop was only given on a weekend. And I was about 2 hours away from the city where it was being offered, and I brought in some friends, and I set up to go and do this workshop in this city 2 hours away, and left my restaurant, in somebody else's hands. Wasn't the best decision I ever made, but and I got to this major city a couple hours away where the workshop was taking place, and the guy that was doing it didn't have enough people, and he canceled it. It was like, oh my God. And the next time he offered it, I knew I had to be there, and I went, and that's why I'm doing the work I'm doing today. That was the starting point of it. So when it's time, you move mountains, and and that's when you're coming from that state of being, or at least you've got an inkling, you're getting some of the signal through as to what's really needs to happen, what's really important. And then of course, if one is locked into what we're calling the non-being mind, the get your bloated nut the bloated nothingness, the trifling treasure, if one's locked in, then they'll build mountains in order to avoid. So one will move mountains to achieve, or one will build mountains to avoid stepping in and doing their work, because there's nothing more important than that piece of work. The way Yeshua said it 2,000 years ago, he said, seek ye first that state of attunement and alignment. Do the work that does that, and then everything else will be made unto you. Everything else will be taken care of. So make a commitment, get the tools out, put them to work in your life. Allow yourself the space to and have the patience to adjust each arm. When you're looking at your body mind unit, it's an instrument, it's an antenna. It's designed to give you alignment with the signal that was called by Emerson the divine circuits, the divine energetic flow that's available to every one of us. There's nothing religious about it, but it is the divine energetic flow. You've got an antenna for it. But if it's been beaten and bruised by generations and generations of people living in hostility and fear, grief, rage, pain, and trauma, then piece by piece, you're going to rebuild your instrument. That's what this work is about. It's rebuilding this body mind unit, this instrument, straightening out its antenna and getting back into alignment. That's what it meant, seek ye first. And that's what we're here to support you in doing. My apology once again for the limited interaction. I'm sure the technology is going to move forward. I know Allende, the gentleman who owns the company and designed the app, is working diligently to get it corrected. So I'll just say thank you for joining us, and please create the best year out of your eternal life. It's an awesome gift to give the world. Take care. Bye-bye.